All right, it is on. So, guys, I appreciate you as always getting on. Who I have is Cyril and Chad. This is a Three Bros podcast recording. So, we haven't done one of these in a while, at least published them. So, I'm excited to get back into the ring or back into doing these again. So, one of the things that I found a really cool YouTube video titled Fredrich Nietzsche How to Find Yourself Existentialism from a YouTube channel called Philosophies for Life. We'll put the link in the description of these if you're interested in taking a look at it. But one of the interesting things, or right from the get go, it talks about how we can find ourselves. And I think that's something that's really important and something that is not really explored upon as much, especially as you get older, as you get into at least my age. You know, I don't know, Chad, where you're at, but comparatively speaking, I feel like as you get older, you kind of lose that sense a little bit because you just get into the grind and all of a sudden you're just something else. So when we talk about finding yourself and how important that is, I know, Cyril, you took a few notes, but did you write anything specific towards what it means to find yourself and what's so important about that?
I feel like we've talked many times, especially the three of us, about finding a purpose. So I think that's definitely why. It's probably one of the reasons why you picked this. It's a really good video that touches on that kind of stuff, and we've all had definitely struggles and deep thoughts on just stuff like that. And I think one of the things. Did you ask me again what you asked me? Because I was about to go into a point, but you asked me something specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, just about finding yourself and why it's so important. Like, what does it mean to you right now, just before we talk about the video itself, to find yourself, and what is the importance of finding yourself?
I think it means to be like secure. Oh man, this is such a deep question. I'm thrown off by this.
Well, I mean, if it's Chad, if you've got
Yeah,
at least cursory
this one
thoughts
threw me off.
on what
Yeah.
it means to find yourself and what's so important about it.
Well, when we talk about Nietzsche, he's one of those 20th century philosophers. And they tend to be rooted in this idea of existentialism, which is the concern, and again, it's loosely rooted in sort of this naturalistic belief that we are natural beings, we are happenstance, we are part of a long line of causal factors. You know, it's these consequences about losing, and Caleb, you and I talked about this recently.
Yeah,
When
we
we
did.
talked about meaning and purpose, we were talking about, and again, this is something that I focus maybe a little bit too much on, but you root yourselves in these ideas about like what the nature of humans are, what the nature of being is. And when we reached the 20th century, when we saw the horrible things concerning the Holocaust and World War One, and we sort of started. I mean, that coupled with the ideas of Darwin in terms of natural selection and how beings could have come to be, we started to like sort of wake up a little bit in terms of scientifically how did the universe get started. And that's where like existentialism came in the 20th century. We started to subscribe more to these naturalistic beliefs about like we happen to be on this planet. And then also when we were faced with the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust, we were like, well, what does it mean to be alive, you know, in the face of these like horrible tragedies? Nietzsche was one of those responses in terms of philosophy where he comes from a position of irreligion almost, but he understands that meaning is what drives our lives. So we're sort of left with this. We kind of have to craft this. What are those things you put up when you want to paint the side of a house? You know what I'm talking about?
Scaffold.
Scaffold. Yes, you need a scaffolding. you have to like build the scaffolding yourself of like meaning.
So what you're saying, if I could jump in here real quick, is that
Yeah.
especially when religion became less of a thing in the 20th century, the difficulty that people had was being able to formulate a specific like belief structure and to give purpose to their life and meaning to their life, because it wasn't just handed to you from a religious organization like the Catholic Church or the Protestants or whoever it may hand it to you.
Yeah, that was the response. So philosophy has had this very long and drawn out dialectic. And in the 20th century, like existentialism was all about, okay, well, we're moving away from this idea that we are here inherently with a purpose, and we're moving more towards this idea that existence precedes essence, that you are born first, and that any meaning or purpose you're going to derive is going to be something that you formulate for yourself. That was existentialism. Right, you have to define the meaning of yourself after you're here. It is not defined before
I
you
see.
get
Right.
here. So Nietzsche is rooted in this idea of, it's not an atheism, but I think it's like an apurposism. You aren't born with this inherent purpose. So
Right.
he's trying to help somebody define what it is that means something in their own life, because it's not handed to you on a platter. You literally have to define it.
So let me jump in right there, because the video, right, goes into four very specific points about finding yourself. And the first one is, don't follow the herd mentality. It seems to be, obviously, finding yourself doesn't necessarily mean you being like everybody else. And Cyril, I know, again, one of the things that you had talked about was not following the herd and trying to find that way of finding who you actually are, regardless of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, there's a part in it that says, there's a part in it that's about just learning to be a loner and how important that is in self-understanding. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of obviously that it's interesting, because when I'm watching that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, a lot of this is not wrong when it says we construct a lot of things as a society, and not everybody necessarily by instinct wants to work towards that. But I don't know how inherently evil the collective is versus, like, so I said learning, I absolutely agree that learning to be a loner is extremely important in your self-understanding, because obviously if you're completely leaning on what everybody else thinks to validate yourself, that is not healthy, and that is not where you want to be. Being able to self-validate yourself, being able to be independent, being able to say, well, I know who I am, and support your beliefs is definitely a strong thing. But I don't know, something also spoke to me about a balance, as I always say with ad nauseum with everything. There's something spoke to me about a balance between, like, you should learn to be a loner, and that's really important to your self-understanding, but also there is value in acceptance in others and as a group in terms of influence. So I thought that was particularly interesting, because I didn't disagree with the idea that you need to be a loner, learn to be a loner in ways to find yourself. But it also, the video went kind of strong in the idea that, like, you could totally cut everybody off, and if you find yourself, then you'd still be happy. I don't know that I agree with that. So,
well, when you talk about being
interesting.
alone and finding out who you are, I know you briefly kind of said you kind of understood that to a degree. And I feel like what I understand from that is that if you're not able to sit in complete and total silence with yourself, if that drives you stir crazy, if that produces, whether it be certain thoughts or visions, or makes you anxious because you're just by yourself, that's an issue. And I can understand how some people might be like, that's, undiagnosed depression or anxiety or something to that effect. But I feel like for a lot of people, what it is that content with oneself. And when you're sitting there by yourself, the question that comes up, at least for me, is, am I happy with myself? And I think to be alone and to be okay with being alone is to be okay with who you are and what you've become. And I think that really drives that point home of,
if I had to pick one side that was more important, it's the loner side, for sure.
Okay.
But the acceptance side is definitely a part of, it all depends on what you want to get out of things too. So,
not following the herd mentality, right? Going back to that first point, what I appreciate about that specifically is that you will not be able to discover what you enjoy, what
Right.
challenges you, what gives you good feelings, right? The dopamine and the serotonin and all the whatever those crazy ass chemicals that are in your
Sure.
body, when you achieve something or when you do something or when you find something that makes you feel good, it might not match what everybody else is doing. And I think to find yourself, what's really important is to take that chance. Don't necessarily, oh, everybody plays this video game, why don't you try this video game? And that's a really like small example, but I think that is something really specific for a lot of people. Like, don't be afraid to try something just because nobody else is doing that. Because without being able to challenge yourself and to try new things, you're never going to know what you actually enjoy. And if you never find that out, you may miss something that may give you that greater purpose in life.
Dude, funny enough, really quickly, Chad, funny enough, a lot of this came back to me to the game. What is the game? Don't let other people bother you. That's the game. Don't lose the game.
Shit.
In like some silly way. It's true. Go ahead, Chad.
I was just gonna say, there is also a lot of, evolutionary advantage to people being cohesive with what the social fabric is. So
yes,
like we are evolutionarily predisposed to be part of the society and the collective rather than the individual, because that's just how we survived. We're social creatures, so that's inherently a tough thing. That's all I want to add to that.
I also on top, adding a little bit more on top of that. The more you work together, the more, at any point in society, I don't care what the technology was, the more people worked together towards something, the more you could produce, the more you could create, the farther you could achieve, the more you could do, kind of a thing. For sure, every single time. You're powerful in numbers, but human beings are divisive. So
I would say yes in terms of like warring communities. It's you need more of a collective if your collective is at war with another collective. But it does kind of change.
Well, the same thing applies to academia and standing on the shoulders of others and researching new things off of research before. And
my point is, the collective is not as important if nation states aren't warring with each other. You can be a little more.
But you'd be more of a collective if you're not warring with each other. So that, of course, like all those nations.
No, individualistically, the nations. You're more like the United States. If you want to talk about how partisan United States politics were when we were in the Cold War versus now, my point is when we had a collective enemy, we're not at each other's throats as much.
Yeah. Okay. That's point taken. That's fair.
That's all I'm saying. Collectiveness doesn't really work when there's not like a dire threat that's threatening all of us.
Yeah, we're both talking in generalizations, but I think both are. Yeah, that's fair.
So let's move into the next point in the video specifically, and that is embrace the difficulty of self-discovery. The fight is an inner fight, and that ties into a little bit with the whole loner thing, and that is you have to internalize that struggle. You have to internalize a lot of that conversation with yourself to figure out what it is that you're looking for. You have to really define what it is that you're trying to achieve, at least to the best of your ability, and knowing that along this path at some point that those definitions or that end goal may change, but at least it sets foot in your understanding at that point. Like, this is going to be a difficult path. Finding out who you are and what makes you
always is
you and what gives you meaning and purpose is going to be extremely difficult, no matter who you are. So what I am curious to kind of get your guys' feedback on is what you feel is the embrace of the difficulty of self-discovery, and what does that mean? And did that hit any specific notes with you?
The difficulty of self-discovery?
And it's unique in this situation because I feel like the way we were raised...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the way we were raised, I would say, gives us a slight upper leg on a lot of people because our dad would always challenge us to figure out what it is that we were doing.
It's true.
Right? And he would always challenge you. He would always say that, there is no try, there's only do. That I used to hate when he would say that constantly. But what it did, I think, was always push you and always keep pestering you to find that next step. What is that next path? What is that next thing that you are going to do? And without being able to have somebody push you, how do you embrace that? How do you motivate yourself to get up in the morning and to continue to try to not just survive, but to find purpose and meaning?
My honest answer to this is other
That's all I'm
people
looking
hold
for.
other people hold me accountable more than I can ever hold myself accountable. I truly feel a type of way about not doing too much for others. I think at one point in my life when I was younger, for sure, doing too much for others. But now that I'm older, it's um like I'm a better version of myself when I'm in a relationship with someone because they get me to do more things, to experience more things, to go do things I wasn't going to do, meet new people I wouldn't have met, right? That kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So and like for another small example, when I was in college, I always made sure I tried to get into study groups because if I told myself there's a test coming up, you could take every single class that I didn't bother to get to know anybody, and I did worse in that class every single time over a class that I bothered to get to know people and have a study group. And so I think as I get older, it's definitely easier to hold myself accountable. You learn, and I've been through things that taught me some discipline and some whatever to do that. But yeah, other people can hold me, So interestingly
So for
enough.
you, although being alone and okay with being alone with your thoughts is important, what's more important is developing and building a good community around yourself. Is that what you're saying essentially?
I think that is correct.
Because that's something that Chad and I talked quite a bit about when we did our talk on Caleb versus Self was what is it that gets you off the couch at the end of the day? And for me, what I told Chad essentially was a certain level of self-hatred and loathing of myself when I sit on the couch on a Saturday afternoon.
There's a little bit of that for me, but it's mostly other people. So like if
Chad, how about you?
Like if I want, go ahead.
Clearly that's where I've been making the mistake because for me, I have, and obviously this is a critical flaw of mine, but for me, I have this sense of if it's worth doing, I should be able to do it on my own with my own sense of motivation, my own sense of pride, my effort towards this thing.
Well, that's not wrong.
Well, yes and no, because you've clearly had more material benefits than I have with your principle of, well, let me gather it in a, small community. Whereas I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, I should be able to do it on my own. And it's interesting
That's
because
interesting. That's wildly interesting. Yeah.
You and I talked about this last time. And like, I listened back to that conversation. Definitely got a little annoyed at the use of the word "sure," but we'll forget about that. But towards the end, you and I we boiled down this conversation that started with religion more to this conversation about community and just like general support of each other. And I don't know, maybe I don't give that enough credit that it deserves. Because it works for Cyril, obviously, and I don't know if you have this collective group of people who are all like sort of just keeping each other accountable rather than just this burden of keeping yourself accountable. It's obviously an easier thing to do.
That is how I see it. And I think there are definitely scenarios that I'll get into with my significant other where I'll see other people in the same scenario instead of acting like that, they'll just act out and say like, well, I don't want to do that. Like I don't know, like so certain things like sit around on the couch all afternoon, drink beers and just watch sports, or go out to a dinner here and go out to drinks here with these people and interact and get to know people. And I've always thought that me sitting around doing nothing is a waste of time and like is not good. I should be getting out and meeting people, and like networking is a big part of life, unfortunately, still, and blah blah blah. And so it's always like, now that I have a significant other, and at times I've had and times I haven't, but when I do, they can get me out to do more. Like I meet all these people. I know all these people in another part of the country because of this person now. Like I do all these things, and I see those things as such a huge positive. And I do see the practical influence they have on getting me off the couch when I wouldn't have otherwise done that. So
the difficulty of self-discovery, perhaps.
Sure.
Well, it's interesting because I know we're coming full circle, Chad, with our talk, but the importance of building that community for me is, bar none, just probably the singular most important thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with, so when you do something on your own, Chad, and you achieve whatever that goal is, right?
Mhm.
You do it completely on your own. You feel so good about yourself, but nobody else can share in that achievement with you. Nobody can be proud of you for what you did because we don't know what the fuck you did, right? But when you do that, let's say hey, Cyril, I'm going to run a marathon, and Cyril shows up to cheer me on. He can be excited at the fact that I did something that I set my mind to, and that shared feeling of success, regardless of whether or not you directly participated in that event or whether you were just being supportive,
Mhm.
gives other people maybe not as much, but just as much excitement for you achieving goals. And to me, that's where I see that community aspect. I don't have to do what it is that you're doing to be proud and to be supportive and to, rah, 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 go, Chad, go fucking do it. To me, that's a really important part of self-discovery, because sometimes without that external motivating factor, guess what? You don't get off the couch.
Right.
You are a useless piece of shit just sitting on the couch watching football.
And that's where I start.
There
to feel
are
like
self-motivated.
Right.
There are self-motivated people.
Yes,
I will say.
Wait,
I will
listen,
say,
and we all motivate in our own ways. I'm telling you how I operate. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, for the most part, we are helplessly social creatures. That's just something we yearn for. Like all of the meaning that we tend to build in our day to day, without trying to root it in some sort of like ultimate reason or cause or supernatural force. A lot of the meaning we build from day to day is just how we interact with each other, is what we can tell each other about ourselves, and how we treat each other. Like that's just
culture, right? Like so, yeah.
It's just right. So there's and no, we are. It's more than culture, because we're inherently social creatures. Like for us, as far as like upright walking primates, it's been millions of years of us just finding this cause in being a collective and socializing with each other and proving ourselves or being unique, whatever consequence that has. So it's just interesting that to me, for some reason, I take it like I would rather do something entirely on my own than succeed but have somebody help me. You know what I mean? I'd rather fail than succeed and have somebody help me, rather than just doing it on my own. That's a stupid thought, but for some reason, like for me, when I do something, I want it to be true to myself and not necessarily at the behest of other people. But that might be unrealistic.
Yeah, let me ask you then, because I have a similar thing about achieving goals on my own, especially with
it's
no
selfish
support. It is, but what I would say, though, is that if you're able to accomplish minor goals within a group or within a collective with other people knowing, whatever that ends up looking like, does that not help give you a roadmap to show you how to achieve things
100%.
Possibly on your own?
I think so.
100. We're social creatures, 100%.
And I think for me, like you do one or two exercises, if you will, not literal exercises, but goals, right? You achieve those goals within your tribe, your community, your group. Everybody feels good about it. Rah, rah, go you. And then that's when you can strike out and do one or two on your own, right? You might succeed, you might fail. And then you can circle back and do a couple more within the community and tribe. To me, that's the cycle that I try to go through, because
that sounds healthy.
There's benefits, sure. Right? There's benefits to both, and I can extract things that I've learned from each thing and continue to try to push that boundary and push that envelope of who I am and what it is that I want to be. And that brings me into that third point that the video makes, which again I really enjoy. Check it out. It'll be in the description as well. Yeah. Say yes to what gives you meaning. Become the superhuman. Become the Ubermensch.
Ubermensch.
And specifically what I get from that is say yes to what gives you meaning is I think we're in a lot of ways afraid to say yes to something that may bring you meaning and joy and purpose in life. So for me, one of the big examples is doing a podcast. I literally sat there for such a long time trying to figure out what the pros and cons are, what potential impact it might have to my job or my relationship or to my children and it's really difficult to find a way to make it all work so that everybody's super happy. But the thing that I always left out is myself. I wasn't
Good.
saying what makes me happy, what should I
Right.
be saying yes to, and not necessarily ignoring all of the risks around it, but putting myself a little higher than those risks so that I could continue to push the boundaries and find that purpose and meaning. And I wonder for you guys, and I'll start with Chad, if there's anything that you guys either have said yes to or have not really considered saying yes to because you're in that kind of same space, or does that mean something else to you, becoming the Superman, the Ubermensch?
Sorry. So ask that again. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is there something that you have been avoiding saying yes to, or is there something that you have said yes to that you're kind of turning the corner on for something that gives you meaning? And it can be a no. That's all right.
It might be a no. That's probably
okay.
why I asked you to ask the question again. Now,
Yeah.
and this is sort of an aside, right? If
Sure.
I may. But for me, when you look at these philosophers, when you look at anybody that professes any sort of theory about how somebody should live their life, for me, how that propagates in their own life is incredibly important.
Correct.
Because if you have somebody who is a self-help teacher, but they're homeless and they have a crack addiction, I'm going to be a little skeptical about your self-help advice, right? So, for me, Friedrich Nietzsche, and this is, again, like, this is more towards the beginning topic. This is a bit of an
go for it.
aside, so you're more than welcome to, cut me off if you'd like to. But Nietzsche suffered a mental breakdown, and he went to, like, a mental hospital, and he wrote a bunch of letters where he was kind of losing his mind. And it turns out he may have had, like, long-term syphilis, which apparently can affect your mental faculties.
It
So
can.
Sure
obviously
can.
that's something to take into effect here, but
It can also make you wear a powdered wig.
that's true.
Yep.
Because you don't want people to know you have syphilis. But my point is, like, when you look at people who are self-help gurus or philosophers, even, I'm not going to, like, just boil Nietzsche down to a self-help guru. Obviously he was, like, a well-spoken, well-written man, but the effect that your worldview that you're espousing has on the way that you yourself live your life is the most important evidence I can examine. Do you know what I mean?
Yes and no, right? Because I feel like just because somebody can write out the way to live your life but not actually follow it to a T doesn't necessarily make that way to live your life wrong.
But the suggestion that they had such a conviction about it to write about it, but they themselves couldn't commit to that same lifestyle, certainly is some information you can learn as a third observer or a second observer or whatever it is.
I mean, sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
but
you have these convictions about these ideas, but you yourself are not committed to them. Where's the disconnect if you have...
Well, just because you weren't able to achieve them doesn't make them wrong. Like, you realize that this is...
But you had enough conviction to write about them.
Yeah, and you have a conviction to talk about it, but you would say that your life isn't completely 100% together, nor would I.
Sure.
Right? But we continue to try to do what we can. Not yet.
Whoa!
I'll talk to you next year.
Sure. I mean...
I get where you're coming from.
Did Nietzsche view himself as that? Did he sell himself as that? Because if he didn't, I mean, because Caleb's point stands. You like to talk about certain things.
Well, he talks about the Ubermensch, right? He talks about the Ubermensch.
Yeah, but he says nobody's achieved that, right? Only 3 people came close, right? Something like that.
He did say that. That's true.
Right. So
And this is a man who suffered from syphilis. So,
which is also true, because that will eat your brain. That will eat your brain.
Apparently.
So I get where you're coming from. I would push back a little bit on it.
I guess on today's self-help guru.
I will say this,
and that's fair. I'll give you that.
To answer Caleb's original question,
yeah,
I told Caleb this before we started. I have said yes to making a commitment to just being active on, like I said, I told you I tweet out, a certain article that maybe puts a veteran in a good light, or it's someone helping vets or whatever, and you kind of just like try to engage with people. And so it's a super small thing. It feels like a stupid thing even saying it, but it is something that I try to stick to. And I think the whole thing of Unified has been something I've been, I don't want to, because I told you before that I haven't pushed it the way that if I truly am at my stage where I want to push it, I'm at yet, but it's still something that I created and something I said yes to, as far as I told you how therapeutic it was and stuff. So I've
What's
tried. Yeah.
What's the Twitter handle?
Party Unified, at Party Unified.
Party,
So yeah.
At Party Unified.
Yep.
And right now, right, you're just putting out articles and information about positive things about people helping veterans helping themselves, being able to move on from whatever thing may or may not have happened to them.
Willfully, yes, and I told you I will, and we did this off recording, so I'll do it on recording now. I willfully admit that it is the way that I am trying to drum up an interest or eyeballs in the things that I'm doing, and hopefully doing it in a wholesome way as opposed to a grifting scumbag way. And then hopefully also the conversations I have are wholesome and in a way that's different than some, person who's pushing a narrative or grifting. And in that way, I hope to kind of build that whole thing.
So if I can push on
I'm
that,
saying
right?
Yes.
Yeah. If I could push on that, what do you feel like doing that, creating Project or Party Unified, the Twitter handle, putting out articles like that? What is it about that you feel like is giving you meaning?
Good question. And my best answer is I'm so glad you asked that, because this kind of just came to my mind. I truly think that a part of meaning for me is understanding and learning perspectives and listening and talking to people who have different ones. And so it'd be fascinating to have a platform where I could do that, where I could talk to all kinds of people, listen to their perspective. This is kind of a vague answer because there's no straight answer on what the meaning is, but it's just kind of, hey, collecting wisdom and collecting information from a lot of different people who might see things in a certain way. I think that'd be
so. It
awesome.
Sounds like what's giving you meaning is learning from other people, their experiences, their backgrounds, and trying to get a better understanding and sense of general feelings towards a lot of different things.
Yes, I've never thought about it like this, but in a nutshell, that is kind of what Unified ideally would be. Yes, for me at least, what I'm getting out of it, I guess. But
yeah. If anybody ever listens to this at Party Unified, check it out.
There you go.
Well, that kind of bleeds itself into number 4, right?
It sure does. Number 4, find your true values. So, we might as well circle back to Cyril. What do you feel like, at least in the Party Unified thing, have you felt like is something that is a true value? Maybe you talked to somebody, maybe you heard something or read something that.
Well, the biggest value for Unified would be, literally just, especially in this age.
Lock her up.
Nope, the opposite.
Oh,
Respectful.
No.
The biggest value would be like the thing that I would prize the most is a respectful conversation between two people who wholesalely disagree.
Lock her.
So
Coming from the
exactly
guy yelling,
the opposite
of
what Chad's saying, right? Exactly. Exactly.
Well, no, actually,
yeah.
Actually, it sounds like what you're trying to do is actually find those type of people to some degree, and having a very pointed but respectful discussion with them about their feelings and their beliefs, especially if they're espousing something that's pretty aggressive, let's say.
Yes. Oh, I would love to talk to the most aggressives. The only thing is, when you start to touch stuff like that, first of all, you need to practice, you need to get experience. But you start to touch stuff like that, you need to do it in the right way where you're not validating them. It has to be in a way where you don't validate, especially when it's hateful stuff. So you have to find a way to, because I don't care if anybody drags me for this anytime. I will talk to anybody. I will have a beer with Donald Trump. I don't give a shit. So, but it needs to, if you're going to publish it and record it and have some sort of value out of it, you need to thread it. You do. You can't validate
I would say that people who shouldn't be validated, if you ask them the right question, will invalidate themselves.
Correct. That's right. And that's where experience.
You don't want to be the person that stands up there and you're like, you have a pulpit like, oh, this person's wrong and such and how dare they? No. You should be the type of person that can have a nuanced conversation, and you ask them the right questions where they just should
kind of step in their shit.
Exactly. They invalidate themselves.
Exactly. Yep.
It's interesting. I was driving.
It's not fair to be screaming like that on the other side too, Chad. You're right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I think regardless, people People should be allowed to say what they say, and if they truly are ridiculous, you should ask them questions in a way that, like, everyone who's watching it understands that they shouldn't be somebody that you take seriously. That's all you have to do. And it's not hard to do when you take people who truly have just irreconcilable beliefs with reality. You know what I mean? You talk to an anti-vaxxer, and it doesn't take a lot of questions for them to answer that you understand as somebody who might even be on the fence is like, all right, well, they clearly don't know what they're talking about. But I was driving out to work today, and it's about 30 minutes away. It tends to be more in the sticks, away from the medium-sized metropolitan area that I live near. And there was somebody standing by the road who had a sign about, like, resist Cuomo, he's a tyrant. He was sitting in a lawn chair, he was flying an American flag on, like, a really high pole. He had 2 signs up, just both talking about Cuomo. And I was like, man, I wish that I had the nuance to just park my car,
Exactly.
just take a microphone out and have a conversation with this man. Like,
Exactly.
I'm not here to attack you. I'm here to understand. I'm here to
Exactly.
understand, and I'm here to just, like, ask you questions that sort of poke at what it is you truly believe about the world. And those things can be
Yes.
very revealing, not only to people who are watching that conversation, but to the person who's participating in that conversation.
And to your point, when their views are super unpalatable, I've seen in my experience for stuff that I've seen online and stuff like that, a lot of times they'll just walk away, especially if you walk up to them, because once you start to poke enough, they know, and they're just like, you know what, I can't handle this. And
Yeah.
they'll kind
Yeah, unless you have somebody who's
would you
super
say-
honest, and they'll stand
True.
there and they'll actually reflect on the fact that, like, you know what, I'm being asked questions in a way that aren't attacking my beliefs directly, but they're just asking me to take a closer look at them, and
Right.
I don't know if I like what I'm seeing. Those are the type of people that are redeemable.
That's
Those are the
sure.
conversations you want to be having, because
Well,
people
I don't-
realize
yeah.
that they might be wrong.
Right, sure.
Like, I'm aware all the time that I could be wrong about everything. And
Oh, me too. I've been wrong many times.
that should be the disposition of every single person that holds any
Right.
kind of belief. You
Sure.
could be wrong about everything that you think you know
Oh,
about
for
the world.
sure.
That should be your base
We
level.
both know we're complete morons. Everybody else should feel the same way.
Sorry, Caleb, I cut you off a
Yeah,
moment
go
ago.
ahead.
No, that's completely fine. What I was going to say is, for me, what I'd love to have that same conversation as well. I think all three of us would. But the difference for me is that I'm not trying to have that conversation to convince the
Me neither.
person that I'm talking to.
No,
Like,
me
you're
neither.
already sitting on the side of the road with a lawn chair and American flag. Like, you are
Yeah, you're not there to
extremely
convince them.
committed to this specific viewpoint. What I would be looking to do is trying to reach out to people who may have a similar belief, like kind of on the fence. They're like, well, you know,
That's fair.
that guy might be right. The guy in the lawn chair might be right, but no one's ever going to challenge that person on their specific beliefs. And for me, one of the true values, if I could bring this full circle that I'm finding with having these talks and trying to find new ways to have conversations like this, is the concept of, like, iron sharpening iron. So I have a specific preconceived notion of the way that I think life should be, politics should be, so on and so forth. But I'm having these conversations. I'm having more in-depth conversations about that. And I'm finding myself being like, you know, fuck, I don't know what I'm talking about. I might need to do some more reading. I might need to do some more listening. I might need to do some more research to figure out what it is that I'm missing. Go ahead, Chad.
To me, the thing that would help a lot, that is severely lacking from our political discourse between just, like, common Americans these days, is if we all started from the presumption that the person that I'm talking to has the best interests for America at mind, it would drastically change the way we talk to each other. Because a lot of the time, what I see because I'm a lurker, right? I don't engage in the discourse. I consume the discourse, right?
Same.
And a lot of the things that I see in terms of, like, Stacy's showing me some Facebook post or something I see on Reddit in a controversial subreddit, a lot of the time what I see is, it's like, okay, here's this person that disagrees with me. They're also an American. They drastically disagree with me about politics. They must hate America. Why is that your presumption? If we start with the presumption that this other person, even if I disagree with them wildly, their base presumption is this is what's best for America. I can work with that. That is somebody that just wants the best, and maybe they're misinformed. That's a base from where most people could talk to each other reasonably. But if you see somebody that disagrees with you politically, they're on the quote unquote other side, and my base assumption is they want to see America destroyed, you can't even have a conversation. No conversation is worth having. Because, like, what? It's just somebody that is just the antithesis of what you think. It's just somebody that wants to see it all torn down. Whether you're on the left or the right, it's just, that person that opposes me just wants to see it
Right.
all torn down. You can't start your conversations there. Don't even have a conversation if that's your base presumption. It's worthless.
Right.
It's a waste of time.
Good point.
It pisses me off, man. It's how most people treat each other. If you are somebody that disagrees with me, you hate America. It's like, can we just disregard? Can we just get rid of that presumption? It's so toxic.
You know what I was
it's
telling
so
someone?
Unhealthy.
I was telling someone today. So we had deaf parents, and I was telling someone today, man, the way that deaf people interact when they don't even know each other, deaf strangers love each other unconditionally.
Right.
And like we
There's
know
a
the
common
reason for
thread.
it. We understand that it's a certain situation that's not a natural human situation where they have a handicap. We got it, and that's an influence in why they trust each other so much. But I told someone today, there's such a, and it was literally today, there's such a wholesomeness to it. There's such a, I'm gonna give you, like, there's such a connection that happens that in the real world it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It's not like, oh, you're my homie instantly. That's how that, it's interesting. So I don't know why they maybe thought of that.
Well,
something that came up today.
I would agree. It's this common thread. It's this common, like, for deaf folks, it's the
Right.
common deaf culture.
Yeah, to your
Like,
divisiveness thing. That's what it was.
both me and you, regardless of where you are in the United States, I understand probably the struggles that you go through.
Right, because you're handy. Right.
It's a common thread.
Right.
And, like, if we could just make a better effort at threading that common thread, regardless of who you are as an American, through
forget
everybody.
the politics, even. Right.
Oh my God, it's over. Right. Like, they're we
true.
would be, but that's just not.
It's not how human beings operate. And it's not how they ever have. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, we're getting worse." It's like, dude, human beings are human beings, bro.
I would say it's not how those in power want you to operate. That's what I would say. Powered, moneyed interest does a very good job at keeping control of its powered money interest.
Well, sure.
And that, to me, like, when you talk about the way Americans are at each other's throats, there is a very select group of people that it doesn't matter if you're mad at Republicans or you're mad at Democrats. Either way, it benefits them.
It benefits these people who are pulling certain levers, right?
Yes.
Right.
Well, division, right? It comes down to division. As long as there's two sides fighting each other, it's much easier to put different types of policies and different types of laws into place that benefit those people.
Yeah, especially
people. We get that, but the problem is at the end of the day, for me, and this is probably a bit extreme, but I think I said this to one of you guys, but it feels like, we criticize places like Saudi Arabia and Iraq and different places that are becoming, in some ways, right, like religious theocracies, or it's democracy, but it's democracy like there's a guise of like theocracy in there, right? Like everything's guided by this religious principle.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we criticize those countries for it, because I would argue that our country is the closest to a Protestant version of a theocracy in the world, right? Because what is the reason that like an Amy Cohen Barrett is put into the Supreme Court nomination process there?
I mean, they've
what are they going after, Cyril?
So
getting all those conservatives in
the
court.
If you want my true opinion, just really quick. Conservatives have been upset
want to destroy America.
Stop it. Conservatives have been upset for many years that the judicial branch is objective. And I hate to say it like that because I don't want to slander anybody. I don't. But conservatives were really upset that the judicial branch over the years actually stood for certain things that were not malleable and like justice and, and they were upset that certain things that they deemed were liberal, but I deem as human rights were being given away by this judicial branch that they didn't like. So they went on a mission to start to nominate people like Amy Coney Barrett in the last 30 years, and they've done a really good job because here she is.
It's way more than that.
It's a lot more than that, but and by the way, really quickly, if I may, to tie that really all up really quick, Trump appointed a lot of everybody knows during the Trump era he's appointed a lot of judges. Trump appointed judges are throwing out his lawsuits right now, so the judicial branch will always and still will always stand in a certain way that is just not political. And I know some people worry about that more than others. Amy Coney Barrett's not great, but the judge in Pennsylvania who's thrown out all these lawsuits is literally Trump appointed, and Trump's upset about it too. So that does show you something. That's good.
Yeah, so, we should backtrack from the political aspect of this conversation.
I know.
That's where we tend to go. But the point of the conversation is finding yourself
what you're saying. But
all right,
is most important. We're gonna on the next Three Bros get together. We'll probably talk about something a bit more political as opposed to philosophical. But I appreciate the time.
Yes.
Anybody who ever listens, please go check out. Let me take a look here. It is called Philosophies for Life, Fredrich Nietzsche, How to Find Yourself. It's an excellent doodle video. Really breaks down a lot of what Nietzsche talked about. And I think in a lot of ways, and Cyril, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but before we started this, we both were talking about how you watch this video and you kind of get a little bit of motivation for yourself to get your shit together.
You do. It's true.
It fades quickly.
Yeah.
Other thing to check out, Randy Dunham art.
Smoke my crack and it fades.
RandyDunhamArt.com.
Interesting.
He designed the logo on both the Caleb versus Self. Right. Well, it's the same logo.
Until next week.
Well, Cyril just said he smokes crack, so either this is all cut out or it's all left in. So we got to adjust that at some point.
I could care less.
It's all left in. We don't.
USA.
Yay,
USA.
All right.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time, Caleb.
I'm gonna jump over.
I'm sorry, Chad. Cyril. Yep, we're gonna hop over, and we will see you next time.